Number 29 does not have a line reference, and that's annoying because it seems like, oh, well, I can't do this without reading the passage. I need to know where to look for this. But remember, we have the chronology rule, which tells us that the questions are supposed to be in the order in which the answers appear in the passage. So we can use surrounding questions that do have line references to help us narrow our focus to fewer lines. Okay, it's still going to be a lot because 43 to 45 to 64 to 75 is a big range. That means we're going to need to read something like 43 to 60 or to 75 here. The answer could be anywhere in that range. And so here you can see I included a lot of stuff. That's a lot of text. So the chronology rule cuts it down a bit, but sometimes we do find ourselves with large amounts of the passage to read. That's okay. At least it's less than the whole thing. But we can also make our lives easier because no line reference questions tend to ask for specific things. And so the more that we can pay attention to the question and focus on what they want us to focus on, the more likely that when we encounter the answer in that long piece of text, we know we've got the answer. So let's look at what they want here. It can reasonably be inferred that one of the intended goals of the 1999 experiment was to determine blah, blah, blah. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of science in this, but the non-science-y thing that I know that I'm looking for is a goal. What were they trying to accomplish? That's something that I should be able to pick out no matter what the science experiment is, right? I know what it means to talk about goals. I know what it means to talk about objectives. That's what I'm looking for as I read. I'm reading with purpose. I now have my purpose. Let's take a look. So we're going to go all the way back to 43. But why exactly humans might have such fibers which respond only to a narrow range of rather subtle stimuli was initially mystifying. Unlike other types of sensory nerves, CT fibers could be found only in hairy human skin, such as the forearm and thigh. No amount of gentle stroking of hairless skin, such as the palms and soles of the feet, prompted similar activity signatures. Olson and his colleagues decided that these fibers must be conveying a different dimension of sensory information than fast-conducting fibers. Maybe in that weird paragraph I can pull out something of a goal, but it doesn't really have the language of like, we're trying to do this. They talk a lot about, like what they're learning, but I don't hear anywhere where they're like, well, this is what we want to know. Maybe just something's mystifying, so they want to answer that question. But it's not clear. Let's keep going. Although microneurography can give information about how a single nerve responds to gentle brushing and pressure, it cannot tease out what aspect of sensation that fiber relays, says Olson. He wanted to know, goal, if that same slow nerve can distinguish where the brush touches the arm and whether it can discern the difference between a goat hair brush and a feather. Most importantly, could that same fiber convey a pleasant sensation? So the goal here in the summary is where and what type, right? Pleasure is a part of it, pleasant sensation, right? What type? Is it a brush or a feather? So that's my summary. His goal is we want to know where this sensation is happening and we want to know what type of sensation we have. So we could keep reading, but it says who addressed the question. Sounds like this is what he's doing now to accomplish his goal. That's going to be less important. So let's take a look now at the choices. And actually, let's bring this down here to where it matters. Okay. So he wants to determine the precise nature of sensations that CT fibers can convey. So, okay, what type sounds like the precise nature? Okay, I might leave that. Precise scares me a little bit. That's a strong word, but it seems at least related enough to keep it. B, the relationship between body hair and CT fiber function. Ugh, there's so many choices in this passage about body hair because it's just a weird thing that you're going to remember. But it wasn't in the lines we read. So notice it talks about body hair earlier up here, but now when we get to the part where the goal was, we're not talking about that anymore. It's not relevant. So this is not relevant to this specific question. The role played by CT fibers in the perception of pain, well, they talked about pleasure, but they didn't talk about pain. And D, the effect of microneurography on CT fiber signaling. Well, microneurography is a scary science word, but we saw that right here. What this is it's kind of their way of learning about the fibers. So it's not having an effect on the fibers. It's their way of studying them. So they're trying to trip you up here just by copying this crazy word and pasting it in the choice, thinking you're like, oh, this scary word seemed important. This choice also mentions the scary word. Therefore, this choice must be important. That's not what's happening here. The things that we did understand were much more important than the science that we struggled with, right? We understood when they were talking about the goal, and choice A matches with our goal. We know that their goal is to understand the types of sensations. Precise makes me kind of nervous, but there's evidence to back that up, right? They want to know whether they can discern the difference between a goat hair brush and a feather. That's pretty precise to me. So I have some evidence that can support that word. This is tricky, but notice that as we were reading that big chunk of text, because we had a clear sense of what we wanted, we were able to be much more confident when we found it and know, yeah, this is what it is. And so much of what we took away from this passage was about that, about the goal, and not about the specific science and how these fibers work and all that stuff. That's there to confuse you. We need to cut through that and have confidence that the actual structure of the argument, of the question, is what's actually important here. And if we need to understand science, we can always do that later as we're sorting through some choices, like in this case, A and D. But for the first part of most hard questions, focus on structure, focus on goal, focus on intention. Ignore the science. Let it wash over you. You'll come back to it if you need it. In this case, we did not need it, and we would still be just as confident in our answer.